Like I said, foreign investments are always welcome. I'm just cautious of Elon Musk's interest in global politics and in wanting to influence the geopolitical developments more than I am the and it presents kind of like a cybersecurity risk. The problem with working with political parties like the Democratic Alliance is exactly that. I mean, for example, I think there's elements of racism within the DA. I mean, they suspended one of their members for old videos of, like, they admitted that they've got people within their ranks who are racist, and some of them they've expelled. So the problem with dealing with characters like that is that they try sometimes to undermine you because you're black.
Welcome to myself Simon show. Today we have a credible brain in the house. He's an entrepreneur, an activist, a businessman. Today we are joined by the chairman of SAYEC, Bonga Makhanya. How are you, my brother?
I'm great. How's it? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How has life been lately?
It's been okay. Yeah, ups and downs, but it's been good. Nothing to complain of.
Yeah, I've realized that SAYEC doesn't say much about political parties. It says a lot about the government as a whole. Why SAYEC have decided to go through that road?
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, look, the South African Youth Economic Council is it's a lobby and advocacy group, but more than anything, it's an apolitical formation. So we try to mobilize or speak to the issues that face young people across the various political formations. So that's why we don't necessarily focus on a particular political party, but try to speak to what government is doing. Because once you're elected into government, you work for everyone.
Yeah.
You don't you let go of your political badges and you become, for example, a minister that deals with energy issues for all South Africans, or you become a minister that deals with agriculture issues for all South Africans across, whether they voted for you or not. So that's why we then work with elected government representatives, because we believe those are credible and the relevant bodies to speak to the policy issues that we believe can be reformed in government, and not necessarily a political party, because and more than anything, we believe that the government itself is the one that drives the development, not necessarily the political party. So that's why there's a focus on government, because they have the responsibility to roll out developments in South Africa, particularly for young people.
Recently, SAYEC has released a very important statement which talks about the national minimum wage policy, and you guys have recommendations. Why SAYEC have decided to go through that route?
Well, I think we obviously, part of the work that we do as a lobby and advocacy group is to speak on policy issues that are in the public domain. So one of them was the national minimum wage. And I think it was out for public comment by the Department of Labor, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously, any South African can comment on any piece of legislation that's out there, or any policy that is out there. So we then responded to that and submitted our submissions on what we believe the national minimum wage should be, because we've been calling for it through various channels like TV and social media and all those things, but we've never actually written formally to the relevant departments about what we believe should be the national minimum wage. We've just been agitating through various channels, but now we've actually decided to write formally to the relevant departments, and we believe that it's something that we feel strongly about, and not just us, but we also believe that many other South Africans should also contribute to that discussion, as it's one that we believe is at the center of some of the economic reforms that we want to see in the country, to deal with levels of exploitation that are faced by young people and levels of exploitation faced by ordinary black workers. So that's something we feel strongly about, and it's something we've been talking about for the past few years, and we finally now have a chance to make a meaningful submission through the relevant government body, which is something that's been on the cards for some time. And if you're looking at a government, I think a government CEO can make about 2 million per annum, 3 million per annum, which I think roughly is about 200,000 rand a month or 150,000 rand a month, somewhere around there. Some can even reach to 400,000 rand depending on the SOE. But all of these things are there for public. It's literally on the relevant website, whether it's ESCOM's annual reports or whichever SOE you can choose. Those salaries can range from 150 to 400,000 rand a month. So when we're saying that the minimum wage should at the very least be around 6.5, 7,000 rand a month, it's also not to suggest that highly skilled people shouldn't be paid well for being highly skilled or something. We just believe that there should be a fundamental base that everyone in society should work from. So and that will then afford you to be able to provide for yourself in terms of feeding yourself, clothing yourself, affording electricity and transport. So the current issue is that South Africans who earn below minimum wage make enough just to get to work and come back. And make enough probably just for some basic food goods, right? But it's what we would call an undignified way of living, because if we're being honest, there's certain necessities and basic human rights, by the way, that are prescribed not only in the Constitution but even by United Nations global standards. So as a country, you need to be looking at, there's a lot of people that are in work, but if they're earning below the minimum wage, what's the point of them earning that salary if that salary is going to bomashonisa, debt, and transport? Because what ends up happening is that once you earn a low salary, people tend to borrow money from informal lenders, and then they end up living in a perpetual debt cycle. So those are issues that come with people earning very low salaries in an economy where now not only are you just using your money to get to work and back, but you also end up in a cyclical cycle of debt. So the 6.5 or 7,000 rand range is a very soft landing spot, if we can say it like that, because I think for people to be comfortable, if government is not subsidizing, they probably need to start looking at around the 10 to 12,000 rand mark, where we can be comfortable enough to say, no, these people can afford most goods and services that they need to survive. But the 6.5 to 7,000 rand mark is if government is also subsidizing transport, subsidizing housing, and subsidizing some of the healthcare. And then, your 7,000 rand a month is just looking after food, and probably other small necessities. But the bulk of the things that you need to survive, government would have looked after. But the problem is that government is not doing that efficiently. So yeah, we believe that the 7,000 rand mark is a safe net. It's not the best, like we're saying, but it's something that we believe can give people a chance, to start out. Because also, once you start working, obviously you can get a promotion, you can move around and get experience. So 7,000, it's not that you'll be living on 7,000 rand for the rest of your life. Although that's what ends up happening for many people, that they end up not growing in wherever they're working. But we believe it's a good start, or a decent start, that should be able to afford basic goods and services.
And one of the statements, SAYEC mentioned that a family of 3 in South Africa, when it comes to groceries, they spend like around 3.4 thousand to buy groceries. And when you guys were making that kind of research, were you looking at people in the villages or here in township? Because in township and suburbs, because like where you are, the cost of living is different.
Yeah, I think we were looking at probably urban areas. It's just a broad study, but I mean, of course, it differs per. I mean, if you go to rural areas, you find, and if you, for example, in KZN, you can find a family of 8 in rural areas, or a family of 10 and more living in under one house. But other other parts of the country, studies will find that there's less people there. So the study that we relied on, I think, was more of like a general urban study to say, look, most average households is around 3 to 4 people in urban areas, and so much they're spending on their groceries.
But to be honest, you and the first lady, you don't spend that 3,000 rand a month to buy grocery. Because like if we talk about 3,000, although like because of circumstances, if we don't afford some of the things, or we don't afford the kind of lifestyle that we want, and that 3,000 we're mentioning like basic stuff, maize meal, as cooking oil, those are the basic stuff. You can't even buy cheese, or you can't buy balloon and other stuff.
Well, I mean, if you're referring to me personally, I don't, for example, I don't, that's not what I do in terms of the groceries and all of those things. We've got our own way of doing things, and I'm not the one that goes and buys bread and all of these things. So but I'm saying, remember also, these studies are not about me.
It's about like the average.
So when you do, it's about what the data is saying and what the data is telling you. So I mean, you might find that I might spend less. Even Lamba might spend 2,000 or 2.5 on groceries, but it doesn't mean I'm a reflection of the general. For example, I mean, I'm in a household of 2 people, right? And I don't have children or whatever. But most South African families have, households of 4 to 6, if not more. There's children, there's all sorts of things. So you might even find that my living costs are less than what the average South Africans are facing. So that's why I'm saying you don't really want to make it about yourself when you do these things. It's more about what the numbers are saying and what the data is telling you. So I think obviously when you put together these studies or whatever, you look at the average and what society looks like, and not necessarily what you as an individual would spend per month.
SAYEC basically is an organization that was established and is established for the issues that face young people. So SAYEC is for young people by young people, if I'm not mistaken. South African government, whenever they speak, they love to focus more on social grants to young people. To say, okay, we're giving them 350. Although they come to say, okay, there's a young person who are saving those 350 and established a business. But 350, to be honest, is not that much of income for one to survive with, like monthly. As SAYEC, what is your stand when it comes to this social grant, where the government says, okay, whenever they want to, maybe even political parties, whenever they campaign, they introduce these social grant issues, and you as SAYEC, you are standing to say, let's uplift young people, let's help them be skilled, let's help them be entrepreneurs.
No, I think obviously it's a double-edged sword, because remember, the grant system is designed so that it can alleviate. It's like a temporary relief. It's not a permanent solution to the fundamental economic problems that we're facing, right? So what do you mean by a temporary solution? It just means that as we currently stand, there's millions of people that are living in poverty, and there's millions of people who don't know where they're going to get money from. And as a result, it means that they're not going to have food and have a basic way of sustenance, a basic way of surviving. So then the government then says, okay, whilst these people are looking for jobs, whilst they're looking for sustainable ways of income, let's give them a temporary relief in terms of a basic income grant for them to buy basic things, right? Now, we can have a debate whether or not 350 is enough or not enough. But at a fundamental level, the existence of a grant is one that is necessary, and one that is probably even governed by our constitution, because you can't let people starve now because you hope that one day you'll be able to find them jobs, right? So you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can do 2 things at once. The first one is that whilst you're finding a permanent and long-term economic solution to millions of people that are unemployed and millions of people that are without jobs and income, you can also allocate resources that can have a temporary relief for them through the grant system. So as SAYEC, this we've been calling for a basic income grant. We've also been calling for an unemployed graduates grant.
Of how much?
Well, I mean, the figures I think are neither here nor there, but at a fundamental level, we believe that they should exist. I think, for example, a 4.5 unemployed, if an unemployed, if off the top of my head, and we've not done the numbers on this, but if an unemployed graduate grant of 4,500 Rand for someone who is looking for a job and who's unemployed and is graduated, we believe that it's not necessarily to say that the 4.5 you must go look for rent and all those things and live a life on 4.5. We're not suggesting that. We're just saying that whilst you're still looking to move around and to eat, here's 4.5 to find your way up until you get a job. And we also believe that there should be an basic income grant of around 1.5, 2,000 Rand for unemployed South Africans of all walks of life. But again, what's important is that these numbers that people are throwing around, it's not necessarily to say that on 2,000 Rand you can survive for the rest of your life, and that is what you must be subjected to. It's to say that whilst you are, looking for income, whilst the economy is in a recession as it is, and was looking for sustainable ways of employment, government recognizes the fact that there's not much you can do for yourself. So therefore, we're assisting you with 2,000 Rand to keep the lights on and to some form of sustenance, right? So firstly, personally, I believe that's something that's necessary, because what is then the alternative? That people mustn't get it, and then what? And then what must happen? Because it's not like if you don't use that money for grants, whatever. There's the alternative is that those people can have jobs now. I don't know if that makes sense. So if, let's say, government is spending 10 billion on grants, the idea is that 10 billion can create jobs for all those 7 million people that are unemployed, which is not the case. It's not the case at all. So there's no quick fix solution in terms of job employment. That's a separate issue on its own. It requires years of upskilling. It requires years of creation of new industries. And it's probably like a 5-10 year plan, if you can call it that, from an economic point of view, in terms of finding sustainable jobs for people. So whilst and that is unfortunately the hard truths. There are no jobs that are going to fall from the sky where people are going to earn 10,000 Rand tomorrow, So it requires long-term strategic planning. But whilst you're doing that, people need to eat now. And that's what the grant system does. It's not to say that if we give you grants, forget about ever finding a job and focus on the grants. No, that's not what the grant system is designed to do. So SAYEC is a lobby and advocacy group, meaning that we see things that are happening in the world, and then we have an opinion. And we share our opinions on them. But those opinions are in line with how we believe they can impact young people in a better way, because we identified that there's no body that speaks to issues that face young people in the economy. There's no organization that wakes up and decides to champion the issues of young people in the non-political space, right? Most of these NGOs or NPOs speak on very broad economic reforms, but none that are actually focused on young people specifically. So in our lobbying and advocacy work, sometimes what people always confuse is that we will identify a government program that is in existence, and then we say that we want more young people to benefit from this program. For example, the Junior Mining and Exploration Fund, right? We were saying that we want to see young people at the center of that fund in terms of
1 billion.
I think now it's actually 500 million Rand. So we were saying that of the 500 million Rand, we want to see young companies benefit from that 500, and not just Because what usually happens in the absence of a lobbying and advocacy group, in the absence of young people which are active in terms of identifying opportunities that are there, you find that young people end up being neglected in these programs. They end up not being prioritized. They end up getting the shorter end of the stick. You'll find that in terms of rand value, it's zero. If you check how much did young people get from that 500 million rand, if you were to ask whoever's administrating the fund or whatever, if there's no youth lobby and advocacy group, you'll find that that figure is zero. But because there's a SAYEC or there's other young people in the space who are saying we want more young people, and again, we don't also exist alone. There's other youth political organizations who are agitating for the same thing. Other organizations we found in the space. Through those voices, you then find that, you know, some of these government programs end up now having some young people that are benefiting from them. So it's not necessarily that it's SAYEC or that are training these people. We are just a lobbying and advocacy group. We literally just come together and say this is what we believe should be done, and this is how we believe that young people will grow as a result or be impacted positively.
And also you identify young entrepreneurs and recommend them to get funding for mining.
Not necessarily recommend, but we profile and highlight some of the young people in the space that are doing well, who don't necessarily have that spotlight sometimes. And, you know, many of the time, some of these companies or government departments will tell you that they don't see young people. So they'll be like, well, you know, we'd like to work with young people, but we don't know who they are. And then what we then do in our lobbying and advocacy work is to publicly say that, no, there's a Marcelo Simon show and that's doing podcasting and these are their numbers. They've been in the space for 3 years, you know, because because of space and time, we interact closely with young people because we are young ourselves. So we know when they're talking about unemployed young people or young professionals, you're talking about us. We are not talking about people that we have to theorize who they are. It's people that we live with and people that we interact with. So it's easier for us to say to a CEO of a mining company that this is a young contract miner because, you know, we're in the space and we're young ourselves and we interact a lot with these SMMEs who come to us and say this is what we're doing. And then we share some of their work with some of these companies. So it's not necessarily to say that we recommend, but it's just to say that we profile and highlight some of the people that we interact with and who sometimes come to us. Yeah.
Do SAYEC welcome the decision of the Government of National Unity to invite Elon Musk to come and invest in South Africa?
Well, SAYEC doesn't really have an official position on that particularly. But I mean, if you're asking me personally what I think, I mean, foreign investments generally are good.
Yeah.
Foreign investments are generally welcomed because they come back to grow the economy, especially where your own domestic capital is not enough or sufficient. You obviously then rely on other markets to come and develop your own economies. But we're studying that development closely because you don't know what Starlink will do to local players, your Vodacom, your MTN, in the telecommunications space. I know they're saying that they want to broaden access to internet for rural areas and make it cheaper and more efficient and whatever. But so equally also competition is welcomed because these players, Vodacom, MTN, they've had a monopoly.
Those ones are, I'm sorry, those ones are big. They're like small ones. If you go to Davidson, there's a black-owned Wi-Fi called Ikeja Wi-Fi, whereby you buy like one voucher and then you recharge for R5, you get unlimited access to Wi-Fi the whole day.
Is it?
Yeah. So if you have guys like Elon Musk who are coming now, those guys are completely gone.
Yeah, so I mean that's the downside of foreign investments or foreign companies coming to invest in your country, is that obviously now it broadens competition, and it actually eliminates some of the local players in the game. So, but look, like I said, foreign investments are always welcome. I'm just cautious of Elon Musk's interest in global politics and in wanting to influence geopolitical developments more than I am and it presents kind of like a cybersecurity risk. I mean, that's why not Tesla, what's this company? Is it SpaceX?
Yeah, SpaceX, where they make this thing.
Starlink. It's not allowed in China, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's been banned in China. It's been banned in certain regions in the world where they just don't feel comfortable with them having that much access to their servers and systems. I mean, if you combine, the data that Tesla has, Starlink has, and Twitter, now X has, Musk, there's nothing that they don't know.
Yeah.
And that potentially is a risk in terms of just cybersecurity and all those things. So does South Africa and Africa want that for itself, where one man has so much power and intelligence essentially over your country's information? And also, I don't know if that's a conversation that people want to have. Yeah, but so I think the presence of Starlink in South Africa and in Africa presents a cybersecurity risk that I think we must be careful of. And I think Musk's interest in geopolitical developments should also be taken with a pinch of salt. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but also you don't want business people to have so much influence over politicians because they end up serving, their relationship and not necessarily the people themselves. But luckily, I mean, here in South Africa, I'm confident in some of the political players' ability to look after the interest of, their people over certain. I mean, there's been many times where our politicians, the president has gone against, big business and a mandate and chosen, what people want on the ground. So I'm not too worried in South Africa per se, but I am worried internationally over the growing risk that presents, where one businessman, controls and influences literally all heads of states in the world, because of this big company that he runs that has all this data and and the money potentially that that he has. So it's not something people should just welcome blindly.
Yeah.
Also,
because it's Elon Musk.
Yeah, but he's a controversial business guy. But I mean, who knows? It could be good, it could be bad. But I'm just saying we should be careful how we approach it.
I really, really understand some of the issues that you are considering if he's coming. And SAYEC, as being the biggest organization that focuses on issues around young people. I've said this to Kanakana before. I don't think that there is any organization in the country that is doing the kind of work that SAYEC is doing. You guys are on your own space. NYDA is doing a different thing. You guys are also doing a different thing. So you guys have access to advisors of ministers of presidency. Have you maybe voiced some of the concerns looking at the president reaching out to Elon Musk to invite him to their country to come and invest here?
Look, and I guess it's quite flattering that you and we get some of these things a lot. But I mean, SAYC is a new entity that I think is trying in the space, and
it's not trying, it's doing well, has broad access.
And so I agree with you. We do have the access that you talk about. But again, for us, sometimes these things, especially when it comes to the politics of it, we try to stay away.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've said to some of the people you mentioned, some of the concerns that I personally have, not necessarily SAYEC, but I mean, I've got an open relationship with many of the people you talk about. And, I share my views about what I think is right and what I think is wrong. and they'll tell me what they think. But I don't think as SAYEC we dive into the politics of whether geopolitics or so. But I mean, I've got a personal relationship with some of these people, and we talk about politics and what do you think of the world, and and I share some of my criticisms of what I don't agree with what is being done, or I agree here. And I think that's what has sustained some of these relationships: your honesty, being able to say what you believe and what you think all the time, without necessarily being rude or without necessarily being undermining or wanting to, so. But also you mustn't always overestimate your influence and create an impression that you've got more influence than you have, because I mean, who cares what I think? I mean, I just share my views, and whoever listens. But I never want a situation where I create an impression to people that I've got the ear of whoever, whether it's the DP or a certain minister or the president, and then think that those people listen to what we have to say. They care a lot about what young people are thinking, so that's why they might want to hear you out sometimes. But I am in no shape or form can influence the political direction of some of the people that you mentioned. And ours as young people is to always, whenever we have an opportunity to be in some of these spaces, share our views, be honest. But I would not want society to ever think, or people to ever think, that we influence politicians, or we have that capacity to influence anyone. We just happen to have some sort of access that we share our opinions from time to time.
So far, looking at the government of national unity, I know you personally and Kana being members of certain political organizations, when looking at the votes results, you were disappointed, but later on, you guys embrace the results of the votes to say this is what people decided, let's just accept it. The government of national unity was formed, and now looking at everything that has unfolded, the issues, the conflict they have, like political parties always like fighting each other. But at the end of the day, I see some of the ministers are committed, likes of Gayton McKenzie. Looking at the government of national unity so far and everything that they have done, Minister Ronald Lamola is always out there international trying to attract investors, and studies shows that he has attracted more than billions and billions of investment to the country. Do you think it's working?
Yeah, I think, look, like you said, again, I speak in my personal capacity when I say that, we are people who actively campaigned and wanted the African National Congress to win elections. And it's starting to show now with how they handled the transition in terms of the type of leadership that is there in the African National Congress. I mean, we were called all sorts of names when we were saying that we believe this would be the best electoral results if the ANC were to win. But that was not the case. And when life gives you lemon, you make lemonade. So you make the best of with what you've got. And at the time, we were not necessarily agreeing, some of us as activists within the ANC, with the position to work with certain political parties. We believe that it was not practical, because one believes you must go left, the other one believes you must go right, and now you're going to build a country where you can't even fundamentally agree on a shared vision for the future of South Africa. So but I think when the decision was taken and a government was formed, yours is to rally behind the elected officials, because there's work that needs to be done. Unfortunately, it's not about you and your views. It's not about what you believed before, because even if tomorrow, the DA for example, is in the Western Cape as premier, as mayors or whatever, it doesn't mean that the work must stop now because we don't agree with the DA fundamentally, as activists or as whatever. So once a government is formed and once officials are elected and once there's a government in place, we hold the view that, South Africans should support the work of that government and should try by all means to make it work, because unfortunately things are running, things are moving, and it's all well to and I still hold my views that I don't agree with certain people, don't agree with certain political parties or whatever, but at the end of the day, there's work that needs to be done that is above my views, and I can't be holding on to the fact that I don't like this person's ideas on how we should change the country. What's important is that what's in front of us now is what we've got, which is the GNU. The ANC still controls 9 out of 11 provinces in the country. It still controls some of the strategic portfolios in government. We still have the president, the DP, treasury. So the core functions of government are still with the ANC. And as an activist of the ANC, I'm happy with that particular outcome. And I'm happy that the ANC hasn't also necessarily given up on its fundamental values, such as transformation, such as inclusive growth. And those are the things that, as an activist, I look forward to seeing. The politics of around the GNU, I'm not going to sit here and try to justify the relationship between the ANC and the DA, or the ANC and the FF plus. Those are things that, I'm not going to dive into. But I think what gives us hope as activists is that the ANC is still running government, the ANC is still in charge, and the transformation agenda is still on the cards, and work is being done to change the lives of South Africans. And I think let's give it some time. Let's give it 3 to 5 years, see how it goes. But the early signs are that it's working. I mean, we would have, some of us would have hoped for a minority government, like in Gauteng, for example, where you are elected without necessarily the support of other political parties. I mean, Panyaza was elected unopposed, for example. He was not voted in by the DA. He wasn't voted in by the MK. He wasn't voted in by the EFF. And he's running a minority government. So those are some of the models that we would have probably preferred.
And he's doing well.
Right? But the leadership has made up its mind, and ours is now to work and support the work of government, because really it's not about you and your.
Do you believe that as SAYEC, do you believe that if the DA and the ANC was like fully involved in this government, like fully committed in the government of national unity, and although it's not easy, try to put like aside political differences, because every year and then they're based pushing each other back and forth. They want to maybe try to prove to South Africans who's in charge, who's smarter than the other. Do you believe that if those kind of factors and aspects were put aside, there was by now so many achievements could have been done?
Yeah, and look, I don't agree with the DA. So I don't, and I don't think I don't think you can measure my conviction as an ANC activist based on how much I love the DA, or try to measure how much I support the DA and then come to a conclusion that I'm more or less of an ANC activist. So the problem with working with political parties like the Democratic Alliance is exactly that. I mean, for example, I think there's elements of racism within the DA. I mean, they suspended one of their members for old videos of, like, they admitted that they've got people within their ranks who are racist, and some of them they've expelled. So the problem with dealing with characters like that is that they try sometimes to undermine you because you're black, right? In ways that are not so overt. Some of us are not necessarily black consciousness scholars, but we've read a book or two and have encountered. So sometimes racism doesn't show itself openly by someone calling you whatever derogatory word, but sometimes it's in subtle ways where in the workplace, white people try to undermine your intelligence and all sorts of manner of things, right? So I think that's what, to answer your question, that is what was kind of playing out, where white people within the DA believed that they are inherently better at governance than the ANC, and they've they know how to do things in a better way. Um, and even when this thing was formed, the first person to announce it was John Steenhuisen through a media briefing. And then Helen Zille was busy undermining, some of our leaders in the ANC. So that's just the nature of people who don't take you seriously as black people. Yeah, leave ANC, whatever. Like some of these people, they just don't take you seriously. Yeah, well, so, and I'm not necessarily saying that the DA itself, everyone in the DA is like that. But I do think there are elements like that. And that's why they even had to expel some of their members, because there's racist undertones and racist attitudes that are there, which prevent some of the work. And I mean, there are some good people in the DA, like the Minister of Communications, the Minister of Education. Those are proper, solid, politicians who I believe do have a genuine interest of changing the lives of South Africans. I know, for example, even that Deputy Minister of Finance, the mayor of, some of them are decent people, and they're good and they're committed to what, but there's also not rogue, but there are some racist elements and racist people within the DA which let the party down in terms of in terms of some of the work that they do. So it's not to say that the DA is a racist completely a lost cause, whatever. But there are some fundamental issues that they need to get right, which undermine the work of government at times. Because I mean, I've never seen a situation where the president calls for a signing ceremony and a minister decides not to come. So those are some of the attitudes that I believe are slowing us down, but it's not necessarily a lost cause. It's not necessarily a lost cause. So it's things that I think even in a marriage, I've never been married, but they say that
you grew up in a family with
they say that there are issues, you learn each other over time, and things get better, but so this marriage between the ANC and the DA, I don't agree with the DA politically and otherwise, fundamentally, but again, it's what we've got. I just hope there will be some sense of political maturity from more their side, because I think from the side of the ANC and other they've been very mature. They've had to,
like Patrick Alliance, Gaten McKenzie's full into government definitional.
Yes, yeah. They've showed their utmost sense of political maturity in terms of having to put up with some of the things they've had to put up with. So, and you even see in Tswane how the DA is handling those negotiations. They are sometimes just too arrogant, those people. But I mean, again, these are all my personal views, and they must never be conflated for the views of the organizations that I work with and lead in sometimes. So, but yeah, those are just my 2 cents.
No, I really appreciate, bro, for your time. What are your closing words to young people out there who are skilled, don't have employment, who have business ideas, they don't have funding, who just graduated, they don't have like employment, some they finished matric, they couldn't qualify to go to a college or university?
Well, I mean, look, again, unfortunately, and it's almost like a hopeless position where you are in, where the only thing you can do is talk, and the only thing you can do is share words of encouragement and to point young people into the right direction. But the only thing I would say is that let's make use of the institutions that exist. Let's make use of the platforms that exist in our communities. In as much as they've not been working and they've not been efficient to the level that we want. But as young people, I believe that if you still have an opportunity to go to school, if you still have an opportunity to go to university, we should take that with both hands. And those who fail to go to some of these institutions of higher learning, let's try and make use of CETAs, let's try and make use of skills training programs, civic colleges, and use these institutions to better ourselves. Where you want to be a business owner, where you want to be an SMME, trader, or whatever the case, let's try to leverage some of these institutions. The NYDA's got funding, because if we don't and we just give up on these institutions, then we've got nothing left. There's really no one or anything that can come to our rescue. But let's mobilize. Let's kind of create safe communities for young people where they can get together and support each other. Because outside of you and I, there's no one is coming to save you. So if we let go of some of these programs, some of these institutions, there's nothing other than that I can say is going to help you. Yeah, but let's agitate. Let's not just hope that the NYDA will help us. Let's not just hope that CETAs will help us, or let's not just hope that some of these government departments are going to give us opportunities. But let's push. Let's make sure that we fight. By all means necessary to get these things. And not be passive about what we want to achieve, because unfortunately some of these old people are not going to be here when by the time that you and I are much older. So let's do everything that we can to push some of these people to take some of the things that we want, whether it's by force, whether it's by whatever means necessary. Let's make sure that we agitate the system and some of these institutions to make sure that they work for us. Because if they don't, really we'll be sitting in abject poverty and have no one except ourselves to blame. So let's continue agitating. Let's continue pushing. Let's continue forcing these institutions to work for us, because that's what they were designed to do. They're not designed to sit and do nothing. They're designed to work for young people of South Africa. So yeah, that's it that I can say. Like, let's not lose hope. Let's not lose fighting. And I'm not one who likes to give motivation, because I think it's useless. That you must just
give opportunities.
Yeah, people must get opportunities, but you must know what you want and let's go for it. We don't have all the answers. Even ourselves, we're fighting. We don't have it all figured out. We've not achieved all that we wanted to achieve, both personally and otherwise. But
fighting.
You wake up every day, you try. Yeah. There's nothing that you can do except try. Yeah, well.
I'm looking at a point whereby SAYEC in the future will be able to host job imbis in rural areas. I'm from a rural area. I know how tough it is for those young people there. Some of them, they're not exposed to a lot of opportunities that are available for them. So you guys have access to any premier that you want of any province. You have access to any minister of any province that you want. And having them to come and talk to these young people, expose them to the opportunities that are around them that are not well aware of, is something that I'm looking forward to see SAYEC doing.
No, definitely. I think we've been pushing. I think now we might have a program at the end of the year in Free State. We're trying to broaden that access, because it's easier to do things in urban areas, but at the same time, we need to broaden the scope. Now we're working with very limited resources, very limited people that are trying, but we try and make the most out of it. And we've been to Kwamahashu in Durban, which obviously is a township, not really a rural area. But we're trying to reach all areas as much as we can.